Thanks for watching our Understanding Attack and Defense Patterns Referee Development Summary video. Briefly, a look at the World Rugby Breakdown Guidelines that have just been rolled out. The tackler always being the priority, not in the way of ball delivery. Slight change to ball carrier in contact with the defender must release before getting up. So a slight stricter definition on held. The Jackler, which is the arriving defender, must be in a position to lift the ball, not just locked on to survive the cleanout. And arriving players on both sides, starting with both feet behind their respective offside lines and moving opposition players when they compete. For coaches, we're hoping that you can take away which areas in the field and situations can be best targeted in attack and defense, how to identify red, yellow, or green breakdowns, and ultimately understanding referee decision making and the management of referees. Our referee takeaways: understanding which areas of the field and situations attacks and defenses like to target, identifying red, yellow, and green breakdowns, and ultimately using the attacking and defenses zones on the field to take smart focus targets and smart positions on the field. Just to explain a green breakdown, we refer to that as a carry over the gain line or attacking point of contact dominance with support. As we see here, the ball carrier is able to win the point of contact, get over the gain line, plenty of support, leads to an easy win for the attack. Yellow breakdown would be a neutral carry or late support for the attack. The ball's taken out into the wide channels, support's a little bit late, giving time and space for a Jackler to compete. And finally, a red breakdown would be a negative gain line carry or defensive point of contact dominance and limited space. We see here the attack is always under pressure. The ball carriers being driven back behind the gain line, and support players are having to come from a compromised position. We asked the group which player actions are or should be relevant at each general type of breakdown. At a green breakdown, it was generally agreed that the second priority was the inside defender, as the expectation was quick ball and there was a need for space. A yellow breakdown, the Jackler, as there was a likely opportunity for a contest, and a red breakdown, the attacking arriving support or the cleanout was the second priority. We say second priority because priority number one is always the tackler, not in the way of ball delivery. An example of how the field is divided up in a defensive game plan: near the opposition 22, the objective is to stay cool, get back on your feet, and field a potential kick coming from the opposition to get the ball back. In midfield between the 22s, it's divided into thirds. The wide channels between the touchline and the 15-meter lines are the hot zones, where often players have license to compete at the breakdown. In the midfield channels between the 15s, the objective is often to connect, generate line speed, and put as much pressure on distributors as possible, while not overly competing at the breakdown to compromise space in the wide channels. And generally, in the defense's own 22, it becomes a no-go zone where the objective is to stop the attack at all costs and have pretty much everyone in the line. And thanks to Aaron Tackle for sharing this concept for what an attacking game plan or policy could look like. The idea when the attack has the ball in their own 22 would be to expend as little energy as possible. If they are going to try and attack, they have to make sure that there's lots of space available. But generally speaking, the idea is to get the ball down the field without expending too much energy. In the middle of the field, players are asked to be smart, look at what's in front of them, and be open to options like kicking for space. And finally, near the opposition 22, the idea is to expend as much energy as possible. That's the time to throw the kitchen sink at the defense and do everything they can in order to get across the white line. So the question to ask is, given what attack and defensive patterns could look like, which zones are most likely to have the most green, yellow, and red breakdowns? Roughly speaking, we discovered a distribution of red, yellow, and green breakdowns as you see here. We'll take a look at some clips from different areas on the field and different scenarios. Here's a look at a scenario inside the defensive 22. We will say it's inside the 22. What is your mentality, and what kind of things are you thinking about doing from this situation? You can unmute yourself at any time.
Chris, I can comment.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so if they're inside the 22, then they're probably looking to use an exit kick, which would mean potentially setting up like a quick ruck and then clean ball to their kicker.
So where might you set up that quick ruck? So, where do you think they would try to do it, as opposed to if they were to control the situation the way they wanted to?
Well, depending on how close they are to the line, they could either look at a maul or maybe just straight to like a crashing number 12 off the line out.
Fantastic. What's a good indicator that they might go off the top versus they might take it down into a catch and drive?
Depends where their loose forwards are, for one.
Sweet. So loose forwards be like 6, 7, 8. The big carriers. So if you have a maul, where would you want your biggest, baddest forwards?
You'd want them in the line out. You'd probably want one of them in the receiver position as well.
Yeah, that's a cool indication. So here we've got the number 9 in the receiver position. So let's see what they do. They do go off the top. It's not always an indicator, but often it can show a team's hand, and it just gives us the opportunity as a referee to take that extra step if we know they're going to the midfield channel. So you said they might look at an exit, so setting up a quick ruck. What might change your idea? So if obviously they're going 2 passes here, and into their big ball carrier, but from this point here, what might change your idea in terms of not necessarily kicking from this and maybe exploring something else?
Well, if I was playing on that team, I'd have a look at where their back 3 was. And if they had like dropped significantly and we had a big overlap on the outside, we could have a go and try and run from our 22.
Sweet. So yeah, and they also do a good job of winning the point of contact. So the tackle starts here, monster leg drive, and a point of contact dominance. So you almost see the behavior changes. 10's having a look out here. He's in a position where he can both kick and run an attack. The forwards are in a position where they can support. Because they've achieved that green ruck, so to speak. So from a refereeing point of view, if we're aware of this situation, bang, big dominant contest. As long as these tacklers aren't in the way, let's move on to that next phase. Because if a team does want to try and have a crack, their attention will be focused more in these channels, and they'll be scanning these channels here. If the defenders, who are still moving backwards, decide to just linger in this hole, it lessens the effectiveness of being able to explore an attacking option, and then we might just see a kick. So
as a referee, we can identify these situations where there's no realistic threat from the jackler. He's on the way backwards. There's no tackler in the way. So not necessarily forgetting about the ball completely, but just having the confidence to turn the attention into the first couple of defenders. So as we see the second phase load up, they do decide to exploit the wide channels, but they do end up behind the gain line. And we'd probably call, given the fact that their support is a little bit flat-footed, we would probably consider we're about to see a yellow or an amber breakdown. And because we're in the defensive 22, we won't necessarily see a jackler right away, but a little bit of complacency, maybe the wrong personnel. We get a couple backline players, in a latching situation. So yeah, maybe a team who clearly are in a good position, they might have a crack at a counter ruck. So just being aware of that as a referee. So if we do identify that we have a yellow or an amber ruck, it might inform our positioning. And I know a lot of people don't like to go too far beyond the 15. And if we had a green ruck here, we can easily just stay outside the 15 and control the space. But if we are worried about a little bit of chaos, just following our instinct, stepping a little bit closer, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're starting to move out and turning our head when the big counter ruck comes. So the learning opportunity here can be, if you notice that, oh, hang on, they're trying to do something, but they're stuck a little bit close to the gain line for comfort. Instead of worrying about moving out, because the benefit of moving out here would be to create space. If the attack isn't in total control, they're not necessarily going to be looking to exploit these channels here. They may be looking to consolidate. So we can stay. There's no benefit to being out wider. We can maybe stay just a meter or two inside the 15-meter line and have that presence. In this situation, the counter ruck is wider than white. He clearly comes from an onside position with both feet. He moves somebody, and he ends up getting cleaned off to the side. And then we get to another player who decides to have a almost half-ditch effort at joining, but then the behavior obviously is a cool zone. You see the 14 directing traffic for people to get out, and eventually it leads to an exit kick.
Next, we'll look at what attacking and defensive patterns could look like in the midfield channels.
So from this position on the field, ball is just on the attacking side of halfway near the 10-meter line. And we're in that inside field zone. So automatically, from a positioning point of view, where would we might want to put ourselves if we see, that we're in the dead center of the field?
I would probably go in a short jockey, kind of in the 9's pocket.
Cool. Let's just get to a breakdown here. So it actually becomes a strip and a turnover. Either way, we're in a short jockey, 9's pocket, but right about where the referee is now.
Yeah.
Cool. And what would be your pattern of movement? Because obviously we're in the middle of the field. He's got options both left and right. How would you move depending on which direction the 9 decides to move the run of play?
Well, I guess it depends. If he's coming to the side closest to the camera, then you just want to chop the hole. Once the 9 goes, you want to kind of chop the hole closest to the breakdown, so you're not expending extra energy.
So if he tries to exploit this space here, you're thinking instead of coming around the corner, you're thinking of just coming in between. Obviously, 9's going to separate from the ruck once he passes the ball. You're thinking of this hole here?
Yeah, between probably, I can't see the number on that guy's back, 8 or 3 or something. That guy.
This one here?
Yeah, that fellow. So probably that hole right there. If they go the other direction, then you're already ball in line. So I'm just kind of chop the similar hole, and then if they're attacking wider, you could close the east-west gap as a collision is going to happen.
So when the ball is passed, you would wait for the ball to go and then maybe get back to a ball in line position this way.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, the benefit of the short jockey is you're in a position to move. We call it the short jockey, and this is actually a really good example from the referee. Is you still, if you're close enough to the 9, you're not in a position of these wrapping forwards here who might come into these lanes here, and B, you're actually in the sight line or close to it, because defenders are always looking in at the ball. So you're at least in their line of sight where they can see you and you can make eye contact in order to create as much space as possible and keep them honest. So first phase, off a turnover and lots of support. Going back towards the 15s. Lots of support, quick ball. And this is actually even though we're slightly outside the 15s, when we get into that 15-meter channel, this is when we might consider taking up a different position. And you see where the referee is right now would be considered a flat attack. We would consider this pretty much of a green ruck. There's the body language of the players is not that they're really going to be attacking something. Lots of support. And we're making sure the tackler is not going to be a problem. Right away, we see the tackler, he's already on his way out, and the referee takes a step closer. So this is that zone between, a short jockey, which would be on this side or on this side, and a flat attack, which ideally would be out here. If we get into this space, we can get into the 9's periphery, which could lead to some problems. So knowing that the ball is going to be quick, this defender here, no problems. And again, not that we're going to blow a penalty for offside, but we want to be creating as much presence as possible to keep these defenders honest so they can come up out of the lines firing, and so that the attack has the space they're entitled to. So moving out into a flat attack position out here will allow us to do two things. It will allow us to have presence for the defensive line, and when the ball's passed, either out to the forwards or out the back to a ball player, our movement pattern is pretty simple. We just find a seam and then we can work back to ball in line, whether or not the players go deep or attack the line flat. So it ends up working out. We go back into a short jockey. Movement's pretty simple. Eye contact is excellent because we see that clearly this player is not much of a threat, but we just want to have the presence of mind. We don't want to be running around ahead of the ball. We just want to stop. We're already in a good position to get to the next breakdown. We make sure that we discourage offside play with just proximity and eye contact. Ball gets moved, we're back to ball in line. And now we're into these situations where we've gone very wide. We could potentially have a yellow or an amber breakdown. So flat attack is good, but we might want to get a little bit closer. And the referee actually works very hard, stays in the flat attack, and it looks like a potential amber or yellow ruck as the support may be close, but the ball carrier does really good to power through the point of contact. And the referee is able to put the brakes on and look at the turn of the head. The contest is over once the clean out is made, heads turned, and now the referee already, as the ball's coming pretty quickly, is able to find a good safe spot without having to, what we don't want to have to do is when we find ourselves, close to the passing lane, if there was a pot of forwards here, this is an excellent position, but we just want to find that nice little hole between defenders so we can easily, step up that 1 to 2 meters without having to sprint 5 meters beyond the ruck and then work our way back to a potential breakdown. So really good movement pattern. And it all comes down to just identifying what's happening, seeing that there may be a threat, there may be a jackal in the wide channels. They do have a crack, but it's still cleaned out, reasonable quick ball, and we can use our strong flat attack position. Again, not too far. He's probably a meter, 2 meters inside the 15-meter line. But, just we call it the flat attack because the attacking hindmost feet are right there. And as soon as the ball's won, taking that 1 to 2 steps up into that nice hole, ball comes, and then we're in a great position to work towards the next point of contact. Here we get into a midfield, yellowish ruck. But what's great about the referee's already decided that the tackler is away from the ball, and the referee actually says, well, there's no way Green's turning this over legally. Eye contact is with the pillars. Maybe a gesture if necessary, but we're able to create space. Goes back into the 15s. Green ruck, referees in a flat attack. Again, creating lots of space. So the benefit of this position is, if we want to get really technical, the hindmost feet would be about there. These players are 1.5, 2 meters behind the offside line. It's good for two things. It's great for the attack, obviously, because it gives them more time and space to operate. But if you look at what these defenders are looking to do, having the opportunity to lean forward and get on the front foot and get up off the line as quickly as possible is good. Whereas if the referee is forced to keep pushing them back, if they're over here from a coaching standpoint, immediately they're on the back foot. And then that line speed that, often coaches are shouting at players to generate is just gone.
We'll take a different look at what attacking and defensive patterns could look like in the midfield channels.
Different scenario, midfield attack. Team starts in the wide channels. Starts with what we could consider a yellow or amber ruck. Team decides to compete. Refereeing, we're still in the flat attack, but if we've identified that there's some congestion or there's a threat or a potential jackler, we can get a little bit closer. If this was a green ruck where we know it's going to be lightning quick and the defense is already on the back foot, we can be a little bit wider in that flat attack position. So that whether the ruck's red, amber, or green just dictates not only what our focus becomes, but also where we position ourselves. And what we would like to see more from the referee is having the confidence of this ball is clearly won, the nine's ready to access it. We would love to see just an earlier turn of the head, and that's all it is. It's an earlier turn of the head. It's eye contact, and especially early in the game, if you can make eye contact to important defenders, especially 13s, who when they're in this channel love to shut down space. If we can get them starting on side, it just cleans everything up for everyone, and it allows the players to kind of understand where they sit within the environment of the game. Ball goes out to the midfield channel. Point of contact dominant, so it's a green ruck. We can be in our short jockey. And again, having the presence of mind, well before the nine's ready to pass the ball, if we're able to get eye contact with the inside pillar, then we're able to also be in the sight line of the 13. We're able to, disrupt that unnecessary or illegal congestion or pressure that might come in here. And we're also in a great position for our next phase. So changes a little bit. We end up with a green ruck. We're expecting more go forward, handling error. So being able to have the presence of mind that the attack might be under a little bit of pressure. And when we're about to observe something like a yellow ruck, just having the wherewithal to stop and actually see what's going on. The attacking team will do a reasonable job of cleaning out under a bit of duress. And again, we get a green ruck, gain line dominance. And again, what we would love to see is right from here, seeing that all the defenders are either on their way backwards or on their way to be cleaning out, having the eyes up and looking at these spaces here so that we can be aware of where the team might want to attack. Again, in that short jockey. Now we get into the 15s. We don't want to wander too much into the 15s because we know it's a hot zone, so we want to give ourselves enough space to make a decision. We get into a yellow ruck scenario where, yes, there's gain line success, but we would call this marginal or its support. The left winger overran his support line, and we have a player who's come from a long way away and another player who's come from a long way away competing against someone who potentially could be in a good position. So Jackler gets over. So I'll just throw it over to the group. So given what we talked about very briefly about the World Rugby guidelines of shifting from survive the clean out to, in a good position to lift the ball, the decision here was play on, but would you take a different view to this? So feel free to unmute yourself and weigh in, but seeing the Jackler, who's this person here, about to have a crack at the ball, and watching the outcome, do you feel as if we would need to make a different decision based on the guidelines that have just been rolled out?
I guess it depends if the guy's on the ball or not. It's hard to tell on this camera. He's in a great position and his body shape looks awesome, but I can't tell if he's actually on a ball or if that's his friend's jersey that's white in there. Like, I can't really tell, but
All right.
you had a better view that day, so I don't know.
Let's see if we can identify the ball right here.
Oh, then he's
Hey,
lifting.
Chris.
Brad, what do you see?
I'm just the way I look at it. I agree with it's hard from this angle to see if he's on ball, but I guess the telltale sign is he's over it, and they're having trouble cleaning him out. And then as they do, the tackler, the ball carrier does an extra roll. So for me, I from those guidelines, I feel like the ball carrier has held on in that instance, and the Jackler's done a good enough job to deserve that ball.
Yeah, that's a really cool indicator. Yeah, because you see let's see if I can circle the ball carrier in frame here. So the ball carrier here ends up in this position. He's in a kind of a classic jackknife presentation, and he ends up coming with the ball a little bit, doesn't he? And now we can see the ball carrier is kind of on his backside, and the ball's ended up on the other side of him. And pretty good effort from you, Bradley, in terms of ability to lift the ball.
Yeah, exactly. He was in a good enough position to lift the ball, but ultimately, where you are in your position, if you haven't seen him on ball, you can also say that's a good enough argument to play on in that instance.
Yeah, so I mean, just looking at the positioning of the refereeing, the positioning is probably where we want to be. A reasonable angle to see the contest. You're ready to step into a flat attack once the ball's won, but it just becomes a bit of a guideline or definition shift. And if we can be a little bit more towards, if a player's in a good position to lift the ball and doesn't get it, can we reward him? And he's very close to turning the ball over. And, but if we go back to the old adage of survive the clean out, which was never really a guideline, it was just a popular term at the time. And what kind of brand of rugby do we want? So we watch this breakdown. It starts, and it will be choppy, but we'll just count it. Breakdown starts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have a 9-second, breakdown. And normally when the ball's slow like that, we have to ask the question, did someone slow the ball down illegally? And, we didn't see the Jackler fall over, so it's not a Jackler problem. And there's no tackler to be seen here. So we have to start thinking, okay, why was that ball slow? And, the onus has to be placed a little bit on the attack here. The defense do very, very good work. So if you are coaching defense, sometimes it's just telling your team that even if you don't get the reward, it's actually a small win. You see the team is in an excellent position. Everyone's on their feet. The black team have just moved laterally across the field and effectively have been running some 30 to 40 meter shuttles. So, the white team defending is in a position where they can win the next phase, win the next collision. And eventually, as some would say, the rugby gods prevail because it turns into a handling error 20 meters behind the gain line and a turnover for the white team. But we don't want to necessarily hope for right outcomes. So sometimes we get lucky refereeing. The referee ended up working out. The team that was probably more deserving ended up with a good reward somewhere up here. But it's not taking that to chance because all the potential threats or infringements that could come, we have the Jackler, pretty good attempt to lift the ball, unable to do so. Now we have other debatables. We have a arriving player who's ended up off his feet. We have a player, being pulled out of the ruck by another player. Now we have the ruck shifts. The attack's able to tip the balances. Now we have potential offside player, potential side entry. We could get into dangerous cleanouts. Fortunately, the player decides to pull out, but we could end up with a whole bunch of different infringements. And what confuses and frustrates players and coaches is if we end up with a secondary infringement like side entry from a player like this, it doesn't represent the action that everyone saw as relevant. So if we can start reading the game in terms of this is going to be a contestable, it's inside the 15s, the support's late. Let's look at the Jackler. Yeah, the Jackler's good. He's got the ball. And now he doesn't, and it's become a mess. The ball carrier's rolled over again, and now we have this prolonged ruck. So it's a lot easier just to give the decision and reward. So it's a bit of a change in mindset from the last few seasons, and always, favoring the attack. But, as long as the tackler is out of the way, we can really think about rewarding the Jackler, who's in a great position to lift the ball in that situation. Cool. So just conscious of time, there's a couple other clips in there that I sent out that you can have a look at. But I do want to come away from this evening with a little bit of a takeaway for everyone. So, I'll send out these slides, but just a couple of, position and priority notes in different areas. You can start to play with this on your own if you're doing some drills on the field and just varying your position based on, what you might see. Where we might position ourselves and where we might look is maybe very different in these areas compared to these areas, compared to these areas. So just practicing it, with our bodies, with our minds. And when we do get back on the field, we may be in a position to see, the game more clearly and ultimately make decisions that, everyone might not agree with, but everyone can at least follow and say, yeah, I understand. For anyone who hasn't received this already, I'm happy to make it available. Just send an email over, cassmus@bcrugby.com. Effectively, it's a really easy snapshot for when we read a green, yellow, or red breakdown, what would be our second priority and what would be our positioning strategy depending on what we read in front of us. Another simple takeaway is the green, yellow, red breakdown game. You just grab a scrap piece of paper, make a T-chart with predicted and actual column.
watch any game of rugby for any amount of time you wish. Just before a tackle is about to happen, just indicate whether or not you think the breakdown will be green, yellow, or red, and also indicate which action or which player will be the determining factor to the outcome of that breakdown. Play it through, write down what actually happened, both color and player or action, and add it up at the end when you're finished and see how you did with your identification of which color and identification of which player action. As always, thanks for joining us. More videos will be up on the BC Rugby Education YouTube channel. And our next online referee development session is coach referee player connections. I'll be doing some work with Nova Scotia's Jack Hanratty for that on May 20th.